Welcome back. President Trump ripping into Democrats yesterday over the shutdown as he lays out the impact it had on the economy. The repercussions hitting the Labor Department, which has not been able to release its data in over a month and is now being urged to prioritize November's jobs report and inflation data. The White House warning some reports may never come out. Joining me now is Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer. Secretary, it's great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. And we're all happy that things are back in place in terms of government. But I want to get your take on what we should expect in terms of data, in terms of information that we need to see about where we are in the economy right now.
Well, Maria, I think there's a few reports to talk about. This September report, we were able to collect the data, but not fully process that when the government shut down because of these Democrats. And so I'm hoping that that September data will be released maybe next week, but we have to fully continue to process that. As far as the October reporting, we were not able, BLS was not able to fully collect the data, especially the CPI or the jobs report. And so they will have to assess for accuracy, make sure they have enough data collection, because for businesses, it was passive data that was submitted, but the household surveys were not able to be done because of the shutdown. So I'm not sure when BLS, if and when they will be able to release that. But I'm expecting that they will tell us a schedule very quickly about when those numbers could come out, which is why you're seeing the White House urging for accurate data to come out for November. These workers have just come back to work yesterday, and the markets depend on it. And the Democrats, this is another error and miscalculation that really affects not only our businesses, but the markets across the nation and the world.
Yeah, for sure. And the month of October, I mean, one could make the argument that the shutdown impacted October business. So, I mean, is that a moment in time, you know, a look at what happened in October because things were shut down and companies couldn't get permits and IPOs couldn't go public and we couldn't do filings, et cetera, that in and of itself dictated the economic activity of the month of October. And that was a slice in time. Does it change come November, December, January?
Yeah, you don't get that time back. That's exactly what I believe that you are saying. Sometimes it's too late to get accurate data points. And like I said, the household surveys were not able to be done, and businesses submitted the passive information. So is it a little too late? It's similar to the Fed a little too late on these interest rate drops. I'm looking forward to the December report on that they will again step up, as the president has oftentimes asked them to pay attention to. But again, because of the Democratic shutdown, we don't have that accurate data for them to make a good decision. But I believe that the Fed needs to cut the interest rates again in December to really prop up this economy that the president has been so forceful in by bringing the trillions of dollars, by the Department of Labor really looking at the skilled workforce. And now this is one more way for the Fed to help out the American people because of this Democratic shutdown. 43 days going on 44. This is detrimental to the markets and to the American people.
Well, in the middle of all of this, we're seeing layoffs. I mean, Amazon reporting 15,000 layoffs or something. Verizon this morning announcing another 15,000 layoffs. We've seen specific layoffs related to AI and other things. Are you looking for a rate cut because things have weakened in the labor area, jobs?
I'm looking for a rate cut because as I have traveled around this country before this shutdown, talking to businesses, one of the things that they expressed to me often was that they wanted to borrow more money at a cheaper rate to invest in the American workforce, to align with what the president had been doing with $15+ trillion in those investments. With AI, I sit on the AI task force. I know I've shared that with you before. We are ready to launch an AI hub so we can collect a lot of these data points to talk about the transformational workforce that is going to happen because of AI. There are businesses who certainly looked at the last 43 days and saw some uncertainty, so maybe they made some decisions with their workforce. But my job as the Secretary of Labor is to make sure, as the market demands come in, that I can assist them with the skilled workforce that they need. And that's where we want to get started.
I like that a lot. What are the specific training? What are the specific skill sets that our viewers need to understand about the jobs of tomorrow? What do our viewers need to bone up on?
Well, through an executive order, the president wants 1 million active apprentices across this country, not only for the skilled trades, but for shipbuilding. We are seeing in all of the trades, welders, electricians. We know that there's a shortage out there. We just want to do a one-quarter turn for the communities across this country to have that skilled workforce. We have deployed $86 million right before the shutdown, which a lot of that will go to AI. I think that's important to focus on, that we need a proficient and literate workforce so that we can be competitive around the world. And listen, the Department of Labor's job is not to determine what the market demands are, but when those market demands come in, it is my job to help these businesses and to help the American people to be skilled in the jobs of today. And that's what we're looking forward to doing.
Okay, I'm glad. I want to make sure our viewers are understanding specifically what this AI revolution means to them and how they can ensure that they are ahead of the game here. But the president has always focused on the American worker, and the Labor Department has launched 175 investigations into companies over potential abuses of the H-1B visa program. This is part of the Project Firewall that I want to ask you about, an initiative which safeguards the rights, the wages, and the job opportunities for Americans, highly skilled American workers. Here's the president on the H-1B visa program. Watch.
You don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
That was the president with Laura Ingraham, that great interview last week on Laura's show. Secretary, give us your thoughts on how companies are abusing this H-1B visa process.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up Project Firewall. Almost 200 investigations now have been brought forward. And what's important to recognize is that there are companies who are using the H-1 visa program who are abusing the program. What we want to make sure is we're always protecting the American worker. The president is absolutely correct. And not all things are and or. They can be together. And what we want to make sure is that we're providing the skilled workforce so that Americans have these jobs first and foremost. If that is not the case, and these businesses need to apply for the H-1B visa program, we want to make sure that they're following the law and not abusing and depressing American wages with foreign labor. That is not the goal of the program. We want integrity. I want to work with the Department of Homeland to make sure that they have that. So Project Firewall, it is the first time in history that the Secretary will use all the tools, and I have been able to sign personally some of these investigations. We will clamp down on these companies who are abusing and depressing wages and not protecting the American worker first.
All right, we will leave it there and watch your work. Certainly, Secretary, good to see you this morning. Thank you. Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer, thank you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.